Welcome to Silverlight Education. In this lecture, we will discuss the BZYCT 133 course, Unit 8 of Block 2. Now, have you ever wondered how a snake can hunt in total darkness? Or how a fish can feel you coming without even seeing you? Well, it turns out animals have this incredible sensory toolkit that lets them perceive their world in ways we can barely even imagine. Today, we're going to open up that toolbox and take a peek inside. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute fundamentals, the building blocks of sensation itself. Then, we'll dive into three of the most crucial tools in the kit: the eye, the ear, and the nose. And we'll finish up by looking at some of nature's most mind-blowing sensory superpowers. Okay, first things first. Before we can even get to something as complex as, say, an eagle's eye, we really need to zoom all the way in. We've got to understand the microscopic engines that actually power every single sense. So at the heart of everything we're talking about today are these amazing little things called sensory receptors. You can think of them as biological translators. They're these tiny, tiny converters that take everything the world throws at them, light, sound, chemicals, you name it, and they turn it into the only language the brain actually understands: electrical impulses. And, these receptors pretty much fall into two main camps. On one hand, you've got your exterior receptors. These are the ones constantly scanning the outside world. They're responsible for what we see, hear, and smell. Then, on the other hand, you have interoreceptors. Think of these as your body's internal dashboard, always monitoring what's happening on the inside, like your body's position. All right, let's move on to our first major tool in the kit, and it's a big one: the eye. So how does this incredibly complex, beautiful piece of biological machinery actually capture an image of the world? Well, in a lot of ways, it works just like a camera. First, light enters through the cornea, that clear outer layer. Then, the pupil controls how much light gets in, just like an aperture. After that, the lens focuses that light, and finally, it's all projected onto the retina at the back, which is basically the eye's version of camera film or a digital sensor. Now, this is where it gets really cool. On that film, the retina, there are two different kinds of light-detecting cells: rods and cones. Rods are super sensitive to dim light. They give us our night vision. Cones, on the other hand, need bright light, and they're what give us our sharp, detailed color vision. And that's why it's so hard to see colors when it's dark. And this basic design, it gets brilliantly adapted all across the animal kingdom. Some birds have two foveas, two spots of perfect focus, for incredible sharpness. Snakes don't even have eyelids. They have a fixed transparent scale, like permanent safety goggles. And of course, nocturnal animals have that reflective layer that causes eye shine, which basically acts like a built-in mirror to amplify whatever little light there is. Even in humans, the way our eye nerves cross over is what gives us amazing depth perception. Okay, next up in our sensory toolkit is the ear. And this is an organ with a really surprising dual identity. When it comes to hearing, it's really all about a chain reaction. The outer ear collects sound waves and funnels them in. These waves make the eardrum vibrate, which in turn moves three tiny little bones. Those bones then transfer the vibrations into the fluid of the inner ear, and that movement is what finally bends tiny hair cells, converting the whole thing into a nerve impulse. But here's the other half of the story. The inner ear is also our balance center. So while the snail-shaped cochlea is handling all the sound, other parts, the utriculus, sacculus, and semicircular canals, are telling our brain which way is up and whether we're moving. It's just a brilliant example of one single organ doing two completely different but absolutely vital jobs. All right, let's switch gears to a sense that works on a completely different principle. We're not talking about light waves or sound waves anymore. We're talking about smell. Yeah, unlike sight and hearing, which detect waves of energy, smell is all about detecting actual physical molecules. These tiny odor molecules travel up into our nasal cavity, dissolve in mucus, and then they bind to millions of chemoreceptor cells. It's an incredibly direct line of communication with the brain. And some animals even have a second, super specialized smell system. When you see a snake flicking its tongue out, it's not tasting the air. What it's actually doing is collecting scent particles to deliver them to a special organ in the roof of its mouth. It's an entirely different way of smelling. Okay, now for the grand finale. Let's look at some of the truly remarkable, specialized sensors that go way beyond the five senses we're used to. This is where nature gets really creative.
So get this. Fish have a sense that we completely lack. It's called the lateral line system. It's made up of these little receptors called neuromasts, and they basically allow a fish to feel the water around it. They can detect currents, vibrations, even the movement of another fish swimming nearby. It's like having touch receptors all over your body, but outside your body.
Right. So how in the world do some snakes hunt in absolute total darkness? Well, pit vipers and pythons have an absolutely incredible solution. They literally have heat vision. They have these specialized pit organs on their heads that can detect tiny, tiny changes in infrared radiation. We're talking temperature changes as small as 0.003 of a degree Celsius. This allows them to create a thermal map, a heat image, of their prey in the pitch black. And that brings us to maybe one of the most sophisticated sensory tools in the entire animal kingdom. How do animals like bats and dolphins see with sound? The answer is echolocation. It's nature's own biosonar. They both send out sound waves and then listen for the echoes that bounce back. A bat emits these ultrasonic cries and can figure out the size, speed, and even the texture of a tiny insect flying in the dark. A dolphin sends out clicks and can map out the entire underwater world, judging distance, direction, even the density of objects. So when you think about it, from a simple cell that can just feel pressure, all the way up to an eye that sees in vibrant color, or a bat that navigates by sound, this sensory toolkit is the absolute key to survival. It's how these animals experience their world. And that just leaves us with a fascinating thought to chew on, doesn't it? Thank you for joining this lecture. We will meet you in the next lecture.